Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Welcome back to another episode of Rock That Relationship. We are knee deep in the series on healing after a breakup. And today we have a really interesting topic on making space for others' joy. This is such an interesting topic that as Tracy and I were doing our prep for it, I really thought we should have pressed record because we had so many interesting discussions that we realized that this topic was incredibly important for us to be talking about in this series. And so kind of before we get started though, Tracy, I know you've done this kind of discussion of this metaphor of this creepy doll. You brought it up in other episodes. I think it's a kind of an awkward and terrifying kind of Chucky kills you kind of metaphor. But I get what you're saying, but I do think it creates a premise for really what we're talking about today. So can you share a little bit about your creepy doll metaphor?
Well, it's just, I don't actually have a creepy doll. I just want everyone to know that. But I'm saying, like, if you had a creepy doll from childhood that you love, but it gives you the creeps, right? And you're carrying it around, but you can't just get rid of it. It's like an ugly doll that you have to drag around with you, that you have to look at every once in a while. And if you just throw it out, it's going to haunt you forever. So you need to, like, still see it, even though you're experiencing joy, even though you're moving on. You need to recognize and respect that ugliness that you still have with you. Does that make sense? The ugliness being all that sadness and pain, but that you can have a life while you're enduring that pain.
Like you're carrying around this doll. I never had well, I guess I did have a Raggedy Ann and she got a little bit like frayed toward the end. And so she was a little creepy. I did finally get rid of her, but I get what you're saying. It's this idea that you are carrying something that is unsettling to you. You can't really put it down, but you still have to live your life with carrying something that is unsettling. And in this case, what is unsettling is really this sadness and hurt and grief and loss and trauma and all whatever might be coming from the relationship that just ended. So that's your doll. Is that kind of, do I have it right?
Yes. And like, you really can't get rid of it because it's part of you now, you know, and you've got to tend to it or it will haunt you. I feel like
haunt you. That's very, very terrifying.
We'll get rid of this analogy afterwards. But yeah, I read The Blind Fury growing up and I couldn't even keep the book on my nightstand without turning over the cover because the girl had like, demon eyes coming out. So, something that you don't want to see, but it's with you, you don't want to look at it, but you have to.
But you have to. Well, and that's the thing, we have talked about it in several episodes about you have to feel until it's been felt, right? Like trying to compartmentalize. And in this case, just sit the doll down and just say, I'm moving on. You can't sort of will yourself to some immediate healing in this process. And so carrying around this doll is just, you carry it around until you feel like you no longer need to carry it around and it doesn't have to stay with you and kind of haunt you forever. But this idea is that you can't just put it down just because you want to put it down. And in this case with like relationships with sadness, when we say sadness, kind of looking at all of the kind of the negative feelings that come with a breakup is you have to work through them. And you also have to simultaneously live your life, but you are in many ways carrying around this kind of sad, kind of just negativity or just feelings, bad feelings, just, whether that's anger or hurt or just grief, but they don't just go away because you're like, yep, I want them to go away.
Yeah. And part of our thing is, and part of your thing with me was get out, do things, and I was still very sad. I was sad all the time. I was sad to be going out and doing stuff, but I still did it. But I could do stuff. That's where I feel like it's healthy to do that. I mean, we did have talked about where, respect your process, but I also think you shouldn't isolate yourself. I don't think it's healthy to just, let your life end because of a breakup. And so part of the healing process is going out, but you're going to be burdened with the sadness at the same time.
Right. Well, and this idea of just like all of a sudden the breakup happens and you like try to like fill your time with lots of things. And we've talked about that in particularly our previous season. And I think that what we're talking about here is a little bit different. It said, as you go out and live your life, understanding that not only is it okay, but it's very likely that you're going to be doing many of those things while also feeling sad. And I know when I went through, a breakup, I remember going out and doing things that I love to do. And for like little blips of moments, I had these just flashes of joy and excitement that I was doing the things that I liked. But then when I had just a moment, it slipped down into like, oh, but I feel sad again. And that had to be okay. It wasn't like all of a sudden I was going to go out and play basketball for an afternoon and I was going to feel great and distracted and like fulfilled. It was that I could still feel some sense of fulfillment sprinkled in with what I was carrying around with my creepy doll that whole time.
Well, and part of that is being around other people, right? So other people aren't going to be in the same stage as you, and they are going to have happiness. And I think that's something we really need to talk about is not stealing their joy or not becoming bitter about their happiness and the things that are going on with them. And I know that you and I dealt with that personally between the two of us, because I was in a very sad place and you were in a really good place. And I think it was the same vice versa, wasn't it? You were in a really bad place when I got into a really good place. And it was really hard to be happy for each other. Like,
yeah. I mean, in the timing,
we talked about it.
Yeah. I remember when I was getting out of, a relationship and I was dealing with a breakup, and it was really, really hard on me. And you and I were just becoming friends at that point in time. And you had just started a relationship that you were very excited about. And so, you wanted to tell me things like, oh my gosh, I'm going to write this love poem. And I'm like, love poems are horrible. Who writes love poems? But I couldn't say that to you because you were feeling elated about it. But at the same time, like, how much do you tell me about love poems when I'm feeling so horrible, right? I mean, it's sort of this balance of kind of checking the context of that conversation.
Well, it's like, if I'm telling you that I'm having a good time in my relationship and we're doing stuff, I mean, you did go out with us and stuff like that. And so I think that's important. And then when I was very sad, I became the third wheel in your relationship, and you never made me feel excluded. And I don't think I ever made you feel excluded. But when we were talking about all this stuff, it was really hard because I was ecstatic and then I was sad and you were ecstatic,
Right. Did you ever feel like you had to temper how ecstatic you were about your relationship when you knew that I was like literally tears were coming down my face about mine?
Yes, I did. Yes. I think that's only compassionate. I believe you felt the same way, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to be like, oh my gosh, you say this thing, and so, it was really funny towards the beginning of your, right after you had your kind of one of your recent breakups, you said, oh my gosh, are you and, and your person, are you two rubbing faces right now? Are you rubbing faces? And I mean, that was kind of your symbolism for like, are you snuggling? Are you loving each other?
Right.
I mean, it was probably, I don't think it was anything more than that, but just this idea of like, are you connecting?
No, it wasn't.
Are you feeling overwhelmed with love and joy? And,
right.
But you would joke with me and be like, are you rubbing faces? And so that was kind of your thing. And it was, in a way, it was a good balance because like, I knew that you weren't like bawling about it, but I also wasn't like, oh my gosh, I spent the whole evening. We just rubbed faces all night. You want to hear all about us rubbing faces? Cause you were like a little bit too overwhelmed with that idea.
Well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, one has to understand their audience and where the audience is. You can't completely deny your happiness or not talk about things that are going well for you. I mean, it's the same, I think, for anything. Jobs, you might be doing well in a job and the other person might not be. Home ownership or something like that. I mean, you still have to, if you're the person who's suffering, you still have to make space for that other person to be happy,
Right.
And it's really hard. It is not easy.
Yeah. Well, I remember with you, I remember that I kind of felt a little guilty that I was pulling you down when I wanted to incessantly talk about my breakup when you were just starting this relationship. And I'm like, gosh, does she really want to be in this like negative emotional space with me like 24/7?
But it wasn't. It didn't pull me down. And that's the other thing is like, I could be in my relationship and be happy and then still be there for your sadness. So I never felt pulled down.
Well, that's good.
The only thing I ever felt was like, a little bit of resentment when I was miserable. And I think everyone has that feeling like, oh my God, I'm the only person who's going through a breakup and everybody else is so happy, you know,
Yep.
or I'm
Yep.
the only person who's single and everybody else is in relationships. And it is hard. It's very hard to deal with that. I mean, same with like family stuff, right? Like, you know, you had a lot of family stuff going on, and I had lost family members, and, you know, I didn't talk to family members, and that was very difficult for me. But I can't be
Right.
like, you know, ew, your family sucks, you know, like,
Right. Right.
I don't want to hear about your Christmas. I don't want to hear about your holidays.
Yeah.
And, you know, with your kid, and then I wasn't seeing my kids. And so it's very difficult. Like, but you have to, it's like a practice, just like anything else. Like, I have to be able to make space for that other person, because you don't want the other friend to stop telling you stuff. You don't want them to stop talking about what's making them happy in their life, you know?
Right. Or have to censor. I mean, that's the one thing, you know, my mom recently passed away, and I was incredibly close to my mom, and I had to make it through the holidays and things, and her birthday was recently, and, you know, it was difficult. And I wonder, and I haven't asked this, but I wonder to what extent other people aren't telling me about maybe like their mom coming to visit or spending holidays with their mom because they're afraid that it will hurt me. And I don't know the answer to that, but, you know, are other people is that compassionate, or are they censoring themselves, right? Like, are they, you know, is it compassionate to say, I'm not going to sit here and talk about my mom? Or is it saying, like, I'd love to talk about my mom, but I'm not going to, because I think it'll be hurtful.
Well, how would you feel right now? I had a great relationship with my mother, and I was just telling you all about it, and it was so great. Like, do you think you'd feel just happy for me, or do you think there'd be a part of you that felt really sad or resentful
I
or
think there'd be a
angry?
part of me that would feel kind of sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
And
it
I
would.
think that when I'm the one talking, then I should, you know, see where the other person is. Yes, I can talk about it, but maybe I should temper it a little bit. Or, I mean, that's always, you know, certain holidays on Facebook, as I've said before, I'm a prolific Facebooker, but there are certain days I just don't want to be on Facebook, just because I don't have those things that other people have that they're so happy about, you know? And so it is hurtful. I mean, I think a lot of people know that. And more people have started to put on Mother's Day, like acknowledging the fact that, you know, you can't just say a mother is love, a mother is this, a mother is wonderful, because that's not true for everybody. And that's like worse. And the people who put on Facebook, you know, I'm really glad to celebrate my mom, but I also am acknowledging that there are people that don't have that. And to me, that's the better way to be, is that you
Mm-hmm.
can celebrate your mom, you can celebrate the love that you have, but understanding that not everybody has that. So making blanket statements about, you know, relationships, or what certain kinds of people, you know, a mother or a father should be, that actually hurts people more, I think.
Yeah. Well, and they think about that when it comes to like also romantic relationships, and, you know, like you know, people will say things like, I hope you can have the kind of marriage that I have. And, you know, it's like, oh, well, I don't even want to get married, or, you know, but it is
Right.
when it does end up kind of in this way where there's that fine line, right, between being compassionate about what you say to someone else, but without fully like censoring your own experience, so that you're leaving out a chunk of your life that you would normally share with someone. I remember, as you were talking about earlier, I remember after one of my breakups several years ago, we broke up right before like Thanksgiving, and for New Year's Eve, I had nothing to do. And so I had a friend of mine invite me to game night, and it was couples game night. And I was the only non-couple. And they're like, well,
It's
how are we going to
horrible.
do it with an odd number of people here? And how, you know, and blah. And it was like, it was like those little comments. I just felt it was
Right.
hard to hear. You know, but I also knew that was my sad doll, you know, or I guess my creepy
Right.
doll that I had with me. And I still had to, you know, find ways to play games and have fun while having that, and
But that is
understanding
hard.
it is, but it is hard. And that's when we say all this ties into the healing process is, you know, we're not healing in isolation. Some people do, but most people aren't healing without the influence of the external world around them. So it's one of those things where, like, if you feel like you're on this path and you wake up and you're having a really good day and you're feeling great, you're moving forward through your sadness. And then all of a sudden somebody goes and is like, oh my gosh, we had the best date last night. And then all of a sudden you like slip back into something where you're like, oh, I'm sad again. That's why the healing process is more than just an internal thing. It's dealing with the external factors around you that other people are going to say and do things that are going to impact how you internalize and experience your own sadness.
Yeah. And I think you do have to make a judgment call. Like, are you going to go to a New Year's party that's mixed it's going to be singles and couples, you know. I don't think I could go to a New Year's party that was all couples after I'd been through a breakup. I think that would be too difficult. Did you know it before you got there?
No, not really. No, I had an idea of
Oh,
a couple couples that were going to be there, but I didn't realize everyone was going to be coupled up.
yeah, that's very difficult. You
But
know,
I mean, you
that's
bring up a good point though, because part of it is, yeah, I want to be happy for other people, but do I want to, if I know that I don't have the capacity at that point in time to really, really genuinely, empathetically feel their joy, do I put myself in a situation where I ask them about something, or I go to something in which I know I'm going to experience that joy, when I know that I might not have the capacity to handle it at that point?
well, I think that as part of your healing is to ask people, okay, well, who's going to be there? What kind of party is it going to be? Because you have to know your limits of what you can handle, and that's okay. I couldn't do it. I could not go to a couple's party. No way, no how. After a breakup, I'd feel just that would put me way back. That would set me back. But I could go to a party that was a bunch of friends, you know.
Sure,
I
sure.
had people over for New Year's recently, and that was the Broken Hearts Club, but I happen to be in a different place now, so I wasn't brokenhearted, but I didn't rub stuff in their face. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the whole point was they were both alone on New Year's, and I was there to be there and talk through all that stuff. You know, so it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
if I was like, come on over, and I'm going to be like macking on somebody, that wouldn't be okay when they're both in a sad space. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to ask and then to choose to do everything that you're invited to because you have
Right.
to protect your emotional self first and foremost.
Well, and also not to choose to have the kinds of conversations you might not be ready for. So like, it's okay if you're feeling super sad and you just decide that you don't want to spend the entire conversation with someone talking about how great their love life is. Like, it's okay. You can maybe talk about other things. Like, you got to know where your limits are. And I know for you and I, though, we talk about, sometimes like when we interact with other people or we go to events that would make us kind of reminded of that we're sad or we're not ready to feel other people's joy and excitement in their life. There's other times in which maybe putting yourself in that situation does give you joy. So like, I know there are folks that say like, maybe I'm single, but I love talking to people about their relationships and how great their relationships are because it doesn't make me sad that I don't have one. It makes me excited to know that I could have one. And so that actually has the opposite effect. Have you ever experienced that where you put yourself in someone else's joyful situation because you know that joy can somehow like give you hope or inspiration?
Well, I used to not. And then I listened to this podcast, I think, or maybe it was a TED talk. I'm not sure, but it was about if you feel envy, that's not a bad feeling. If you feel envy, then you should model yourself after that person because if you're feeling envy, that's something that you want, right? So you could, rather than be resentful, learn from what they have. How did they get it? How are they managing it? Things like that. Like it could apply to anything, their career, their relationships, things like that. And I think that that's modeling, and I think we'd all be better off if we had better relationship modeling in this world, better
Mm-hmm.
connection, better friendships. I mean, I feel like that's what I'm trying to do with a bunch of things. And that's what we're trying to do with this podcast is to promote that better modeling, to promote like discussion and working through these things so that they don't lead to the loss of relationship or friendships.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you're talking about that, the idea of envy, it reminds me, I was talking with a friend of mine that I had met through this manifesting group, and we were just doing kind of a one-on-one Zoom chat talking about the things that we were manifesting. And I was talking about this book that I'm writing on heartbreak and healing and kind of getting into, the weeds a little bit with her about it and how excited I was and all of this, this talk about it. And then the manifest about the book and all of this. And you know what she said to me? She said, I've been wanting to get back to writing. And she said, instead of saying like, ugh, I just haven't been able to do it and starting to feel down on herself, she said, I feel completely inspired. I feel like you were supposed to be on this call with me right now because you are literally the voice of the universe telling me like, hey, it's time. Let's do this. And she said, thank you for being there. Thank you for spreading like your excitement and your joy about this, because I feel excitement and joy about my writing project. And now I'm going to get started. And I thought, what an interesting response. Like I've never had that where someone actually felt my joy and tried to incorporate it. Now, I don't know if I've done that as much with relationships, because I do remember that when you were getting into your relationship, and I was dealing with a breakup, I wanted to, be in a relationship too. Not because you were, and I wanted to like compete or be in alignment with, but it was like, I want that too. I want that excitement and that honeymoon phase. I want that like googly eye thing, and so I started to go out and just like pound the pavement to like find someone to do this with. And so it inspired me, but in a sense, it I'm not sure.
I think it quickened your process. I thought you went a little overboard personally with the trying to date. And I thought you should slow down. But I see, because you were hanging around us all the time, but that's how I feel too. Like I was your third wheel for a long time.
I know. Yeah. I mean,
it was after you had been my third wheel. And so therefore remember, I even said this to you. I thought you rushed it. I thought you pushed too hard. And you needed more healing time and more space. And so for me, that was actually good to see, because it made me slow down. It made me I did not have any interest in dating. I was not planning on dating. I wasn't doing anything, right? And I was just feeling my feelings and all that.
Yeah. Well, I unfortunately brought the creepy doll to every date that I was on. That's pretty much how it happened.
Did you really?
Well, yeah. My first date after the breakup, you remember, I ended up in my car in tears.
Well, okay, but not in front of the person.
Oh gosh, no. And this person was absolutely lovely. And a year later, I would have probably dated her. But, yeah,
it was too soon. I told you that.
I know.
That was too soon. But then immediately you went on to the next one, and truly, I think you found fault with everybody, because it was too soon. But
I wanted what everyone else
reaction
had.
To me. Yeah. Well, that's the thing here. There, we need to talk about that. Wanting what everyone else has.
Well, that's part of it.
Maybe it's just not supposed to be at that time,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I see you're in a happy relationship. You're in a happy relationship. So I can either say, I'm going to be bummed out, depressed, and even more sad because I'm all alone on this healing journey and no one can relate to me because they're all happy. Or I can say, I'm inspired. I want to have what they have. I'm going to go out and get it. And, there's kind of pros and cons to both of those really, but I wanted that joy too. So I come more from the idea of like, I'm not bitter about the things that make you happy. I just want to I want to have it too. So I try to find a way to have it too. Sometimes I move a little fast and a little eagerly, but.
Yeah, because you had your whole, plan about it. And I think the difference was, I had been separated at that point for 10, 11 months. So it wasn't, you were just broken up with. So I felt like you needed a little more time. And I had time. It didn't look like it because I wasn't legally divorced yet, but we'd been separated I'd moved out, 10 months earlier. So it's hard. It's like, I think that's the thing is like, you can't look at other people and then rush to get what they have because maybe you're not ready for that yet. And clearly mine didn't result in anything but an implosion. So, 8 months later, that's not my fault. It didn't work out, right? But like, it's like you don't know what position you're going to be in from day to day, No,
I mean, because some days you could feel really, like you said, envious or jealous that, or resentful that someone else has something that you want. And other days you could say the very same exact situation. Oh, I want what they have too. I'm really excited and inspired and I want to go do it. And that can change. And that's also part of the healing process is being okay with the idea that you may fluctuate every single day between different people's circumstances or whatever. And you may have the same exact situation where it could be where you and your person are like, talking about your awesome weekend. And I'm like, oh my gosh, all I did was like sit and pet my cat and I'm so sad. And,
right.
and then like 10 minutes later, I could be like, oh my gosh, I want to have an awesome weekend too. And then like 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sad. I just want to pet my cat. And like those fluctuating emotions are okay too.
Yes. And also though, if you want something that someone else has, you have to talk to them about the process that they got to be there. You know what I mean? You can't just look at them and assume something. Oh, they must just be magic in relationships, or they got this and it's going to be so great. You know what I mean? Like, it
Right.
would be helpful to know like how much time, how much therapy I did to even get to that place, to be able to even think about dating someone again, right? Like, I had done so much therapy and we had met, and yeah, I pretty much started right after we met, but I had done a ton of therapy, whereas you were in a more recent breakup, a
Right.
very traumatic one. So you needed something else. And I did really feel like you were rushing it, but I was also being supportive because it was kind of hilarious what was happening.
Well, yeah, I wrote a book
I
about it.
was kind of a voyeur, and
But
there was
that
some kind of too much funny stuff happening.
it was true. But but that also is part of my healing too, was going through it in that process. But, there's, we keep talking about, making space for others' joy, and, thinking about how other people also portray their joy is really important. I find it interesting, especially, I know this is probably more of something that you encounter because you're on Facebook more, is that people portray things as more joyous than they really are. So you may have this, like, I want a relationship just like these two people. And then all of a sudden you realize that it's really not that great after all, or it's like an idealized situation. Like, there's no way anybody could have that kind of a relationship. It's a fairy tale. And so I think sometimes too is like, holding up these standards of these fairy tales makes it really difficult to like, to feel a sense of like, I'm inspired to do that too, because it feels so out of reach.
Well, that's very interesting. And could be a whole podcast series about Facebook. I just don't see Facebook the way that other people do. I guess I take people at face value. I mean, I know people say that people are putting a lot of fake stuff or unrealistic stuff on there, which as you know, I don't. I don't do anything that's fake or unrealistic. And I just put the good and the bad and the ugly out there. And I, I don't get influenced by other people. I think that's something very important though, also, is that I can't look at somebody else's Facebook post where they're like gallivanting around with their new love and get upset about it, right? Because you don't know what's going on. But also, it's not your life. Like, that's the thing. Everyone's on their own path. I mean, that is a very important, I don't know what you'd call it, a tenet or a precept to me. Like, we are all on our own path. Your path is different from my path. My path is different from even the person that I might be dating. You know what I mean? Like, I can't take on a Facebook friend's path and think that that's some reflection on me. It's the same with, like, I've never been influenced by magazines, the makeup and how women look in magazines and all that. Like, people say it like wrecks people's self-esteem. It's never even, doesn't phase me in that way. And I think that that's where we need to get to as a society, is you do you, I'll do me. But you got to know who you are in order to do that, and that's got to come, like, if you can be happy for somebody and listen to what they have to say, the only way you're going to be able to do that is to not take it as a judgment on yourself, to not let it reflect back on yourself. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, but that takes a lot of effort. I mean, it is so common that people put, I don't want to say fake stuff. I mean, they do put fake stuff, but just kind of an idealized version of themselves, or an overabundance of kind of joyous moments on social media. And there's even a name for it. It's brand management. I mean, it happens so commonly that there are people who teach you how to do your own personal brand management, to put out all these great things to make you look good. And it's hard to decipher between what is real and what is not. And so, I mean, it's like you see pictures of people who are like, here I am today. I went to the grocery store and I bought green beans and it was such a great experience. And you're like, come on, you bought green beans. And some of that stuff we can kind of see through that, or maybe it was a transformative green bean experience. I don't know. But the point is that sometimes those idealized senses of joy, it's hard to know whether they're exaggerated or not. And then it's like, I want that too.
But that's where you have to get to the point in your life through therapy or something else where that stuff doesn't affect you, where, you know what I mean? Where you can look at that and be like, oh, cool, they got the beans, or, oh, cool, they're having a great love affair. That's great. And move on. Like, I think that through my therapy, that's where I've gotten to in my life. I think a little harder with, like, I told you at one point that I was getting upset about all of your financial successes, remember?
I do remember that.
Like
Yeah.
I told you, because I knew that it was bugging me. And if I didn't verbalize it, it would grow into resentment. So I think it was very important for me to verbalize that and to tell you. And then at one point, a different phone call, you said, well, I'm not going to share this with you because I know it bums you out. And I said, no, that is for me to work out. Like, you should be able to share whatever you want. Like, if something good is happening in your life, you should be able to share it. And if I want to have this kind of financial success, then I need to follow your path and see what you did and figure out how that I can get there too, but it has to be realistic. Like, I have to know you. And if you're judging yourself based on some social media posts, I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster,
I know.
recipe for disaster.
And in people's heads, I'm imagining that a lot of people say yes, like I agree, but it's hard. It's hard sometimes when you're inundated with, all sorts of images of people's joy and feeling a lack of it at the same time. So you're carrying your creepy doll and you're getting resentful to your creepy doll. And the temptation is I'm just going to put this doll down before I'm ready because I want to feel that too. I want to be done. I want to feel that.
Right. And it's like, if you're looking at ads or all these things, of course, happiness sells, they're not going to sell sadness, but I don't know. I guess I feel like I'm around more real people. I mean, there are people I'm sure on my Facebook who are fake, but it just does not affect me. Doesn't even faze me.
Well,
might crack me up every once in a while, but it doesn't make me look at myself and feel bad, And I think that's something that through this healing process for me with this last breakup is like, I got to the point where truly I love myself. And if somebody else doesn't, well, there's nothing that I can do about that, Like, I'm actually happy with myself, and it doesn't matter. My hair is crazy and sticks up, or, I don't look like a model, or I'm not rich and have a, nice fancy car. So what? Like, I'm living the life I want to live. And that's where you have to get to. Everybody needs to get to. And I think like therapy was profound for me. Friendship was profound for me in that. And having this for the first time in my life, truly like experiencing the sadness and being with it and not kicking that doll to the curb, but keeping it with me and like getting through it. I think that really I'm a different person. And both of my exes have said that. The ones that I'm very close to have said, you're so different than you used to be,
Mm-hmm.
And they liked me the same. They liked me before and they like me now, but they're happier for me and they think I'm more settled,
Yeah.
I'm more settled in myself.
You learn and grow over time. I mean, that's the thing is for every interaction.
Well, we should. Not everybody does though. It's hard work.
It is. I mean, sometimes the learning can be intentional and sometimes you're just kind of smacked in the face with an experience that you're like, well, I learned from that. Right. But, I think when we're looking at this whole making space for others' joy in relation to the healing process, right? We're talking about a couple of things here that, that we've really been able to talk about and hit on today was this idea of, can you, be a good manager of your own boundaries to know those kinds of conversations or those kinds of experiences or events that you may not want to attend or participate in because you know that you're not emotionally ready to really genuinely feel someone else's joy before you might say or do something that, that comes out and it's like, you're upset about it. If I know I'm going to be upset about going to a couple's game night, then don't go to a couple's game night. So, I mean, there's that one piece. The other piece is being really clear about talking with other people, like you brought it up with me, this idea of, it really bugs me when you talk about your financial successes. So being really open about, like maybe asking people to, be conscientious about talking about all the great things going on, especially if something is really sad. Or, it may be that the person says, I want you to talk about great things because I don't want to talk about my sadness right now. Tell me something great. Like that was something I was doing, right after my mom died. I was like, tell me something good about your day. Just tell me something good. And so I asked friends to actually text me something good about their day. And I have friends every day who would send me something good about their day because I just wanted to know that good was happening around me, even though I felt like good wasn't happening within me or, in my immediate situation.
But that's where you have to also, you look out the window and see there's a bird there. There's a, the sun is shining or these things are happening or there's a butterfly that like, this is the thing about being in the world that you have sadness is always among us, it's always with us.
And
it's not going to go away.
No. So you can figure out, do you want to be in situations where you're not ready to deal with, someone else's joy? Do you want to be in situations where you want other people's joy to help bring you inspiration and excitement and, avoiding that envy? Do you also want to make sure that you're in a place where you're not reading into the overhype of kind of an idealized, joyful situation where you're internalizing it? I mean, it sounds like you've done a good job with that, but I know most people haven't, right? It's like seeing other people's joy that feels like, it's like that, the neighborhood couple who all of a sudden gets divorced and you're like, nobody saw it coming because they were the ones who always hosted the block parties and the kids were at their house. And so also understanding that what you see isn't always what's going on. And so this kind of sense of joy is really a perspective and not necessarily a static truth. But, I think a lot of this is what, we're talking about is figuring out for yourself how you're feeling in the moment, and it can change, and sticking with that sense of sadness as long as it takes to work through it, or the negative feelings, but also knowing what your capacity is and what you need. And if you need, like in some senses, I needed someone to send me a text about something good, great. But then if I got too many of them, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, don't send me any more texts. You just knowing your own boundaries and knowing your own needs is really important. And you talked about therapy, you can do it through journaling, you can do it through processing with others, or just thinking about it on your own. But I think that's the key to healing, is understanding that you're going to have a process that's going to work for you. But that it may be different than someone else's, and really kind of thinking about this piece of making space for others' joy is something we don't really talk about. We just kind of say, oh, come on, move along. You're good.
Right. And also, what if you're like, or people are rude to you? Like, I don't want to hear about your breakup anymore. I don't want to hear about it. Can we talk about something else? Like, I was very clear with my friends, this is what I need to do, and if they can't hear it, if they can't be around it, then I can't be around them, because that is what I need to do to get through this. And
that's what you needed at the
fortunately,
time.
Yeah. And I had so many people that were so helpful and would listen to me cry over and over. And, it was so great. But that's where you've got to choose people that will be in your life who support you, and that you support them, like it's symbiotic, right? Like you're going to be there for them. I was there for you when you were sad, and then you were there for me when I was sad.
Right.
And I had so many people, and I wouldn't at this age hang out with people that couldn't be emotionally supportive anymore. There's no point. I mean, whatever, talk to them, straight or whatever, but maybe go to a party and they're there and talk to them, but like not as my close friends. I mean, my friends kept me afloat, they really truly did.
Well, and those friends also needed to understand that when they were hanging out with you, and I knew this is what we were going to talk about, because you needed that, and I'm your friend, and my joy can sit on the back burner, and I can, listen as you're talking about what you need, because that's what friends do.
And if you keep talking about it, eventually you get to the point where you're making jokes about it, and it becomes lighter and lighter. In my opinion, it's like that thing, you light a candle, or you take one candle and light others. You're not diminishing the light of the first candle, you're lighting the other candles. And that's how I feel about pain and suffering. And I mean, maybe because I was a cop, and maybe because I've done this work with so many people who have, family members who died in tragic situations, is that don't ignore that of other people. People tend to like, oh, that person doesn't want me to talk about it. No, they don't want to feel alone. They don't want to. They maybe do want to talk about it. So if you truly want to be a good friend, then also make that space for their sadness. So even while we're sad, we can make space for others' joy, but maybe they can make space for your sadness. Because if you share that, in my opinion, what I've seen in my life, if you share that, you are so much better off than if you try and hold in all that pain and grief on your own. Exactly. That will eat you up,
Yep. And I love what you said. I think, it's a really great way to wrap up is, making space in your sadness for others' joy, but making space in your joy for other people's sadness. I think that's a really key point. Well, we've had another interesting discussion today, a really, really cool topic, and really important. And I don't think that sometimes we really get to issues like this as much when this is really, really kind of digging down into the weeds of healing. And I think it's such a an important thing for us to be discussing. So thanks, Tracy, for the great conversation. And thanks for all of you listeners to tune in for us, for our conversation today. And we look forward to having you listen in on another episode. And until then, go out there and make sure that you rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.